Can you believe our daughter is coming home and we don't have a room for her? This is troubling. Can you move out this time? I was shocked to hear these words suddenly from my mother-in-law. In the house where I had been living with my husband's family, my mother-in-law labeled me as a bad wife who doesn't do household chores and criticized me daily. Then they wanted to kick me out to make room for my husband's sister who was coming home for childbirth. We can't keep an incompetent person who contributes nothing to the family any longer. Hurry up and leave so we can free up the room. My name is Tracy. I'm a 33-year-old office worker. After graduating from college, I joined a well-known, large company in my hometown, actively working and living the life of a working adult. As a salesperson, I find fulfillment in dealing with various clients and advancing negotiations. I built my career overcoming numerous challenges and became accustomed to my job. That's when I met Nick, who would later become my husband. Nick, 2 years my senior, was the section chief at a client company. We became close through work, gradually sharing personal stories as well as business discussions. I was gradually drawn to Nick's sincere and kind nature. Apparently, he was attracted to my serious approach to work. It was embarrassing but also very pleasing to hear this later. Our relationship naturally evolved into a romance, and we got married when I turned 30. We rented an apartment in an area with good access to both of our workplaces and started our married life. After marriage, I was promoted to a managerial position, leading a satisfying life both at work and personally. However, there was one concern: my mother-in-law's occasional visits. She, having devoted herself to homemaking from a young age, believes that a daughter-in-law should perfectly handle household chores. Tracy, you've left some dishes unwashed again. And look at all these piled up laundry. You're so sloppy. What kind of upbringing did you have? My mother-in-law would say these harsh words whenever she found the opportunity during her weekend visits. I planned to clean up that day, but the atmosphere didn't allow for any rebuttal, and all I could say was, "I'm sorry." In reality, I've always focused on my career and was not good at housework. Therefore, my inability to handle household chores made her look down on me as incompetent. When I was single, I rarely cooked and usually did all the cleaning and laundry on my weekends. After marriage, to reduce the burden of household chores, I invested in home appliances like cleaning robots. Nick understands my personality and doesn't force me to do household chores. On the contrary, I'm truly grateful to him for cooking dinner and doing laundry when he returns home earlier than me. Mom, Tracy is working hard every day and doesn't have much time. Please don't complain. Nick would defend me whenever his mother said something, but she would just get upset without listening. Oh, that reminds me, Nick. Our finances are a bit tight this month. Can you send a little more money home? Suddenly, my previously upset mother-in-law would start making brazen demands with a smile. I sighed inwardly, thinking, not again, and resigned myself to the situation. There are many family members living in the house where my parents-in-law reside. Currently, Nick's parents, brother, and grandparents are living there. Until a while ago, Nick's sister, Lauren, lived with them and contributed to the household expenses by working, but recently she got married and left the house. As a result, only my father-in-law and brother-in-law were working after that, leading to a decrease in household income, and they came to struggle financially. In reality, their income was lower than that of our household. Nick started to provide financial support to his parents' home, but his mother frequently visited us, demanding more money. I think it was okay to refuse considering our own household budget, but Nick couldn't ignore his family's suffering. After some hesitation, Nick agreed to her demands. Okay, I'll send a bit more. That's my Nick. Unlike someone else, you understand. My mother-in-law was satisfied with his answer and gave me a glance. I felt dissatisfied but didn't argue back. I wanted to move away from my husband's family, but our home was convenient for commuting, and it was hard to suggest moving considering his situation. However, our lives changed afterward. There was an issue with the care of Nick's grandparents, who lived in the family home. Originally, my mother-in-law and Lauren were in charge of the care, but ever since Lauren left, Nick's mother's burden increased. It seemed that my father-in-law and brother-in-law left the care to the women and hardly helped. After discussing with Nick, we decided to live together with his family. As we didn't have children, I agreed to this decision but set one condition for Nick. I wanted to continue focusing on my job instead of using my salary for household expenses. I strongly wanted to keep my job and had no intention of quitting. When I expressed my intention, Nick agreed. Of course, you don't have to quit your job. I don't want to involve you in my family's problems. But I'm sorry it turned out this way, Nick said apologetically. Indeed, living together might increase my mother-in-law's sarcasm. This was my only concern, but we decided to start living with his family, with me continuing my job to support the household and Nick mainly handling caregiving and housework. However, when we started living together, his family wasn't pleased with our arrangement. It's absurd for Nick to do caregiving and housework. That's the wife's role, said my mother-in-law. It was a response I had partially anticipated, but I wondered why such roles had to be fixed. My parents-in-law and brother-in-law insisted that housework and caregiving were the wife's job and didn't change their opinion. So, they ordered me to reduce my working hours or quit. However, if I were to comply, our income would decrease and we would continue to struggle financially. To support a family of 7, I need to work full-time. I will continue working as a regular employee, I explained and stood my ground. However, my in-laws remained unsatisfied and deepened their displeasure of me. How can someone have such an opinion? I can't believe how disobedient this daughter-in-law is, my mother-in-law exclaimed angrily, and her attitude toward me became even harsher. Afterward, my brother-in-law also criticized me, using work as an excuse not to help mom. What an incompetent wife. Then, both of them began leading the bullying against me. My father-in-law barely intervened and didn't protect me. Nick's grandparents, who returned to their bedroom immediately after dinner, had limited contact with me and showed little interest in me. After starting to live with my in-laws, my work became busier, and I often returned home late. When I came home after overtime, the family complained that I should come home earlier, looking down on me as if my job was insignificant. I felt deeply frustrated when they belittled my work. I took pride in my job and was committed to my responsibilities as a manager. However, my in-laws kept telling me to prioritize housework over my job, and eventually, I found more peace at work than at my in-laws' house. Once, unable to bear the bullying, I complained to Nick. Why am I treated like this despite earning the daily expenses and even paying for new furniture and appliances for your family's house? Nick listened to me seriously. He understood the problems his family would face if I were to quit my job. I'll talk to everyone. I'm really sorry for involving you in my family's issues, Nick said, and I was filled with gratitude. He must be tired from doing housework and caregiving after work. Later, Nick tried to discuss it with his whole family, but their opinions didn't change at all. My brother-in-law even angrily accused me. You didn't discipline your wife properly, and that's why she has become so selfish. It's your responsibility to train her. My in-laws agreed with him, and their criticism toward us began. I had had enough. The attitude of Nick's own family, who once received financial support from him, was unbearable. Sorry, Nick. I can't live here anymore. We discussed our future seriously in our room. Nick, too, was angry at his family's response and immediately decided we should end this living arrangement and move out soon. If we were to continue like that, our stress would only increase. Therefore, Nick and I decided to leave the house, began searching for a new residence, and started preparing for our next life, keeping it a secret from his family. Half a month later, on an afternoon, Lauren, my sister-in-law who had left the family home after getting married, returned unexpectedly. It was during the weekend and I was off work, so all of us, including Nick's family, were at home. Seeing Lauren return with a large suitcase, my mother-in-law was overjoyed. Lauren, welcome back. Have you had lunch yet? If not, I'll make something right away. Thanks, Mom. I'm really hungry. Lauren passed by Nick and I without greeting us and headed straight to the living room. Hold on a second. Lauren, why did you come back all of a sudden? Nick asked as he entered the living room. Lauren replied, I'm about to have a baby soon. It's my first time, and I feel insecure, so I've decided to come back home for the childbirth. I'll be staying here for a while. My father-in-law and brother-in-law who were watching TV in the living room also seemed to welcome Lauren's return. However, Nick and I were confused. This was because the room Lauren used to use was being used by us then. Indeed, the family home was spacious, but at that time it housed 7 people, and there were no vacant rooms. Before I could say anything, my mother-in-law looked at me and sighed dramatically. What a predicament. Lauren is back, but we're short of rooms. Tracy, could you leave now that we have this situation? Huh? It took me a moment to grasp the intention behind her words. Well, the room you're using originally belonged to Lauren, right? Now that Lauren is back, it's only proper to give it back to her, my mother-in-law stated clearly. Then she laughed and said, we can't keep a useless person who doesn't help with anything around the house here, can't we? While seeking agreement from the other family members. My father-in-law nodded, and my brother-in-law looked at me and laughed. Wait a minute, isn't that unreasonable? Nick argued while I was still in shock. Lauren then haughtily said to me, you're a wife, yet you don't properly take care of the house. There's no point in you being here, just leave already. However, I was the one supporting most of the household expenses. What would happen to this house if I were to leave? Did they even understand that? Hesitating to voice this out, Nick placed his hand on my shoulder and shook his head in resignation. It's okay. Let's leave this house together. Nick's words were filled with determination, and he seemed more reliable and strong than ever. We had already planned to end our cohabitation in the near future, so we made the decision sooner. Understood. Then, we will leave right away. At my response, the entire family burst into laughter. Anger welled up in me toward them, who neither held back Nick, who had been supporting them with housework and caregiving, nor did anything else to help him but laugh. The thought of unpleasant people leaving clears my heart. When you leave, make sure to take away all your belongings, my mother-in-law declared, so I quietly nodded. We immediately arranged for a moving company and left the family home with Nick that day. The next day, while temporarily staying at a hotel, we received a call from my mother-in-law. It was surprising that my mother-in-law called my cell phone instead of Nick's, but since I had an idea why, I decided to answer. As soon as I picked up, my mother-in-law's angry voice came through. What's the meaning of this? Today, the movers came and took almost all the furniture and appliances from the house. You arranged it, didn't you? As I was accused, I simply shrugged in resignation and thought, just as I expected. Nick, who was nearby, seemed to hear her voice as well and gave a wry smile. The movers I had arranged the day before took away all the household goods, including furniture and appliances. Among them were large items like the dining table and TV, and with most things gone, the family was in complete chaos. I just followed your instructions to take away all my belongings. Everything that was taken was purchased by me. That's why I disposed of them, I replied, and my mother-in-law was at a loss for words. The furniture and appliances that were newly purchased when we started living with them were all actually paid by me. As I asserted they were my personal belongings, my mother-in-law squeezed out a frustrated response. I did say take them away, but this is too much. How are we supposed to live in a house with nothing? She exclaimed angrily, to which I calmly replied, now that we no longer live together, it's no longer my concern. It must be nice to have a spacious house now that the unpleasant people are gone. I firmly said this, ignored my still complaining mother-in-law, and hung up the phone. I thought she would call back soon, but surprisingly, there was no further call from her. Afterward, Nick and I began a new life in our new home. The furniture and appliances retrieved from the family home were still in good condition, so we moved them into our new place. We spent some peaceful days, but about a month later, we suddenly started receiving frequent calls from the family. Wondering why they were contacting us then, I considered blocking the calls, but I hesitated because there was something I wanted to tell them. Busy with work and unable to answer the phone, I came home one day to find a missed call from my mother-in-law. Nick was still at work, having to work overtime, and was not home yet. When I responded to the call, my mother-in-law's irritated voice echoed, "You finally picked up. What do you need?" I asked, and she hurriedly commanded, "Life has become difficult since you two left. Come back home." Apparently, various payments had started to fall behind after we left. Before living together, the family home underwent extensive barrier-free renovations for the grandparents, and there was still a considerable loan to pay. Nick was paying that loan when we lived together with his family. Additionally, the money I earned was used for purchasing furniture, appliances, and monthly household expenses. But after our departure, they struggled to repay the loan and manage the household finances. The monthly living expenses I paid amounted to about $4,300. The family, who had depended on our income and spent recklessly, had no savings. Unable to cover over $4,000 of monthly expenses, they became desperate and asked us to return. I was just appalled by such a selfish request. "This is the result of you driving out two earners. We have already started a new life and have no plans to return," I refused clearly. However, my mother-in-law was unyielding, saying, "How dare you? This won't do. Put Nick on the phone. Nick is still at work and hasn't returned yet. Actually, we moved to a high-rise condo. We are now living comfortably and peacefully, so we cannot fulfill your unreasonable request," I explained, to which my mother-in-law seemed surprised. Nick and I were secretly searching for a new residence when we were living with his family, and after finding the high-rise condo that met our ideal conditions, we were able to move immediately after being ousted from the family home. "Does this mean you're leaving us behind?" My mother-in-law accused us with a tearful voice. "You have no right to criticize us when you did nothing but depend on our earnings and spent money recklessly. Please don't interfere in our lives anymore," I stated firmly. As soon as I finished speaking, I ended the call without waiting for my mother-in-law's response. I was relieved to have informed them about our move to the high-rise condo and proceeded to block all contacts from his family. This new home was something we had earned with our hard work. We wanted to make a clear statement to his family, who had irresponsibly relied on us while constantly complaining and living leisurely. When Nick came home, I told him about the call from his mother. He had also received multiple calls on his cell phone but was unsure how to respond. I thought I couldn't abandon them because they are family, but I'm tired of dealing with them, Nick said, looking disheartened. He too seemed exhausted from his family's constant dependence. Subsequently, we changed our smartphone numbers and completely cut off contact with his family. Since we only told my mother-in-law that we were living in a high-rise condo, they wouldn't know our exact address. Afterward, Nick and I enjoyed peaceful days together, busy with our managerial roles but feeling fulfilled in our daily lives. 3 years passed, and Nick and I decided to check on his family's well-being after a long time. Since leaving the family home, Nick had not visited even during Thanksgiving or Christmas, so we had no idea how they were living. Upon arriving at the family home, we found no sign of Nick's family. The house was up for sale, and complete strangers were living there. Strange, where could everyone have gone? Nick wondered aloud. Encountering a friend of my mother-in-law who lived nearby, we decided to inquire about their recent circumstances. The events that unfolded at the family home over the 3 years then came to light. Lauren had returned for childbirth, claiming it was temporary, but in reality, she was already divorced and continued to live in the family home even after giving birth. Despite our departure, the addition of family members put further strain on the household finances. My mother-in-law began working part-time, and Lauren soon put her child in daycare to start working, but their nights were filled with household chores and caregiving for the grandparents. The exhaustion from adding child care to their already busy lives was understandably unimaginable. Moreover, Nick's grandparents stopped going out in order to save money, but they both eventually developed dementia. My mother-in-law had no choice but to quit her job to focus on caregiving. But even with Lauren's help, there was a limit to what amateurs could do. Unable to withstand the situation, they quickly appealed to my father-in-law to move the grandparents to a facility. But my father-in-law and brother-in-law refused to listen to them. They were relying on the grandparents' pension and were reluctant to spend on facility costs. As a result, the family's opinions were divided. I can't stand this life anymore. I've reached my limit. Nick's mother cried out in agony and left the house with Lauren and her grandchild. Left alone, my father-in-law and brother-in-law couldn't take care of the dementia-ridden grandparents, and despite hiring helpers, they soon reached their limit. Eventually, they decided to place the grandparents in a facility, but by then the family had fallen apart and no one returned home. Struggling to pay off the renovation loan, my father-in-law and brother-in-law ended up selling the house and moved elsewhere after paying off the loan. Hearing these stories, Nick showed a sad expression filled with mixed emotions. We asked the neighbors for the name of the facility where his grandparents were staying and decided to visit them soon. A few days later, a neighbor contacted Nick, relaying a message from my mother-in-law. Apparently, she had learned about our visit to the family home. According to her, my father-in-law and brother-in-law were living together and were paying for the grandparents' facility costs, but they seldom visited them. My mother-in-law herself was living with Lauren and her grandchild, working part-time and still struggling with life. I can't stand this life anymore. Please, let us live in a high-rise condo, too. The neighbor conveyed her plea. Hearing such a request, we were just astonished. Nick, too, had grown wary of his family and stopped contacting the neighbor afterward. I don't intend to involve myself with my family anymore, but I do want to keep an eye on Grandpa and Grandma until the end, he said. I agreed with his decision and supported him, focusing more on our work than ever, especially when Nick occasionally felt the loneliness of losing his family. Having overcome difficult times, we want to live even more happily from now on. We plan to cherish our current life, live peacefully, and consider having children in the future. Are my dad and mom's move finished? Ben decided on his own that we would live together without consulting me, and he didn't help at all. He never seems to want to listen to my opinion. He proceeds with things based on his own ideas and acts on his own. Even now, he only asked about the situation over the phone, but I don't even know where he is. I had been disappointed in Ben before, but it was thanks to that person that I finally made up my mind. Yes, it's all finished. I just moved into a high-rise condo myself. What? While hearing his surprised voice, I laughed with my son, Aaron, who was next to me. He had left everything up to me, so he hadn't noticed anything. What do you mean with a high-rise condo? A high-rise condo means just that. A high-rise condo. With that, I ended the call. The next day, Ben contacted me. Apparently, he had ended a trip with his beloved parents in the middle to come and see our house. There's nothing here. Where is the luggage? Where could it be? What do you mean, where could it be? For details, please ask that person directly. After saying that, I heard a voice of anger from the other end of the phone. I, Cindy, am a 57-year-old housewife. When I was younger, I worked in sales, where I was a top performer and secured many contracts, so I was relied upon in my department. However, I quit because Ben, who was once my boss and trainer, asked me to. After many talks and discussions we had together, Ben confessed as we were close in age, and after several years of dating, we got married. He asked me to quit my job and dedicate myself to the family, promising that he would never let me struggle, so I resigned upon marrying despite having many regrets. After that, at the age of 33, I gave birth to our son, Aaron, and it felt like I was leading a happy family life. Ben doted on Aaron very much, sometimes to the point of spoiling him, which often exasperated me. On the other hand, I didn't have a good relationship with my in-laws, especially with my mother-in-law, Diane, with whom I often disagreed about how to raise Aaron, resulting in a strained relationship. It was around this time that Aaron went to university, became independent, and started living alone. Ben reluctantly agreed on the condition that he would visit regularly. After that, it was just the two of us. But Ben started diverting the money he used to spend on Aaron to his own parents. While there was nothing wrong with that, the continued purchase of luxury goods, trips, and gourmet food continued. Aaron didn't need them, so there was no problem. But my mother-in-law, who would take anything she could get, started to affect our finances. Ben, where is the $1,000 I left here? I used it because Mom said she needed a wallet. What are you talking about? I told you not to touch it because it's for the rent. Shut up. It's my money that I earned. What's wrong with spending it as I like? A mere housewife like you shouldn't complain to the head of the house. Whenever I say anything about money, Ben raises his voice in objection. Housewife. That's a term Ben often brings up during our arguments. You're the one who asked me to become a housewife. You being unemployed is a fact. If you can't earn, don't complain. If you hate me being unemployed, I'll go out and get a part-time job. Hey, don't joke around. If I allow my wife to work outside, I'll be seen as incompetent. There are still people with such views today. Ben, unnecessarily proud, wouldn't accept me working outside. When I started working secretly, he found out through his mother where I was working and came yelling at me. In such circumstances, I couldn't even take up a part-time job, so I had no choice but to start working from home. Initially, the income was modest, but it gradually increased, and I was able to manage by using the money for living expenses. Honestly, if the income continues to increase, I might consider divorcing Ben. One day, when I was working from home, the doorbell suddenly rang. I wasn't expecting any visitors, but thinking it might be a delivery, I opened the door to find my mother-in-law standing there. Hi, is something wrong? Nothing's wrong, you shut in. She yelled as barged into the house. Again, this word shut in filled me with disgust. When I was working, my mother-in-law had told me to quit and become a housewife. But once I actually retired upon marriage, she started blaming me like this. Ben is earning money, and that's how you can live. Yet, you dared to defy your husband. She would not listen to me at all and kept attacking me until she was satisfied. Just when I thought I couldn't concentrate on work because of this situation. Diane, how many times do I need to say it? Stop bothering Cindy, darling. Cindy, I'm sorry that Diane is bothering you again. My father-in-law, Henry, had come to take my mother-in-law home. He has always been rational, and ever since he retired, he has been gardening while also keeping my overly assertive mother-in-law in check. He had returned from gardening today and, noticing my mother-in-law was missing, came over worried. I had received his help many times. When will I see my grandchild? My mother-in-law once asked. If you keep pressuring Cindy like that, she'll feel even less like having children. He had defended me when I was struggling with fertility issues and alleviated the pressure from my mother-in-law. And after Aaron was born, when my mother-in-law tried to take him from me, this child is a precious heir. I will raise him. Please give Aaron back. Then saying enough, my father-in-law rescued Aaron from her hands. He also scrapped the cohabitation plan that had been proposed at the time when he saw that my mother-in-law might become too intrusive. Ben had sided with his mother and wanted to live together, but thanks to my father-in-law firmly saying, "You're the husband. Put your wife and child first," we were able to avoid cohabitation. If I had lived with my mother-in-law, I might not have endured her mistreatment. I am very grateful to my father-in-law. Thanks to him, I've been able to maintain a reasonable distance from my in-laws. Amidst being frustrated with life with Ben, I suddenly received news that my mother had passed away. She had a chronic illness, and my sister had been caring for her. My father passed away early, and my mother hadn't touched the assets he left, resulting in a considerable inheritance for my sister and me. What will you do about your parents' home? Ben asked me. My sister has her own home, so she said she'd give it to me if I want it. How about moving to your parents' home then? He suggested while we were sorting out the inheritance. We currently live in a rented house, but my parents' home is quite old. Yes, how about moving after renovating it? I suggested. How will you fund the renovations? Ben asked. I'll use the inheritance, I replied. I haven't told Ben the specific amount of the inheritance. If he knew there was a large amount, he might give it to his mother. That's why I've only told him about the renovation costs. That shouldn't be a problem then, Ben agreed. I felt relieved inside. Moving to my parents' home would mean being long distance from my in-laws. That means I could also keep a distance from the problematic mother-in-law. With that in mind, I began actively preparing to move. The renovations were eventually completed, and I moved to my parents' home. What's this? I thought, because there were more boxes than expected. The moving company handled it, but I was surprised by the amount. While having my suspicions, I opened a box of unrecognizable luggage and found my mother-in-law's clothes inside. Ben, there's a box here packed with your mother's clothes. What's this all about? I asked. Did I forget to tell you? My parents and I are going to live in this house together. What? I was astonished. I was dumbfounded by this sudden announcement. Why do we need to live with my in-laws in my parents' house? I couldn't help but argue with Ben. I didn't hear anything about this. The renovation using the inheritance was meant for us to live together. Shut up. I've already decided. Ben raised his voice and pulled out a document. Holding the document, I was shocked. A divorce paper? If you oppose it, it's divorce. How will you live if you leave me, an unemployed woman? Ben said. The divorce paper already had Ben's signature on it. While I stood there stunned, Ben started packing his travel bag with clothes. Pack up the luggage and prepare for my parents' move by the time I get back. Wait, where are you going? I asked. I'm going on a little trip. I sold my parents' house, so I'll use that money. I'll stay at my parents' house for 2 or 3 days, then go on a luxurious trip for a week. Ben answered and left. I was left feeling the worst. The cohabitation was decided without my consent. He left the bothersome task of sorting things to me, and he went on a trip with his parents. At that moment, I decided to retaliate thoroughly. During the preparations to move, I spread the insecticide I had stored throughout the house and left. I am very averse to insects, and although I knew the renovated house was safe, I had bought the insecticide just in case. As I looked at the divorce paper in my hand, the phone suddenly rang. That call led me to make a significant decision. Aaron, it's been a while. Mom, what's up? I contacted Aaron and received some help from him. 3 hours later, an unwelcome call from my mother-in-law came. You made me go through something terrible. What? It turned out that my mother-in-law had borrowed a spare key from Ben and entered the house without permission, just after I had spread the insecticide. And she almost fell from breathing in the air. She threatened at the end, I'll sue you. I felt it was karma. It's a far bigger issue to enter someone's house without permission, I retorted and hung up the phone. Since she's still lively enough to complain over the phone, she must be fine despite inhaling the insecticide. Thinking about cutting ties with such a family made me feel relieved. And a week later, when everything had settled, Ben, who hadn't contacted me at all, reached out. Are my dad and mom's move finished? Ben decided on his own that we would live together without consulting me, and he didn't help at all. He never seems to want to listen to my opinion. He proceeds with things based on his own ideas and acts on his own. Even now, he only asked about the situation over the phone, but I don't even know where he is. I had been disappointed in Ben before, but it was thanks to that person that I finally made up my mind. Yes, it's all finished. I just moved into a high-rise condo myself. War. While hearing his surprised voice, I laughed with my son, Aaron, who was next to me. He had left everything up to me, so he hadn't noticed anything. What do you mean with a high-rise condo? A high-rise condo means just that. A high-rise condo. With that, I ended the call. Finally, I was able to cut ties with Ben. My gratitude for the people who cooperated with Aaron was immeasurable. Thinking back, I headed to the sparkling new kitchen to prepare a special meal for Aaron. That day, when I told Aaron everything over the phone, he came to help right away. It's good you could come, but is work okay? No problem. I explained the situation, and they told me to go right away. Aaron works in real estate, and his company was started by a college senior. since he had helped since his student days. It seems they understood immediately when he explained the situation. Mom, I need you to finish the contract today or tomorrow. I understand. So, I completed the necessary procedures and I was able to move into the new high-rise condo. Today, as I was preparing for the celebration, Ben contacted me. Just imagining the reaction of my selfish husband and meddling mother-in-law when they visit the new home excites me. Hey, what's this? The next day, Ben contacted me. Apparently, he had ended a trip with his beloved parents in the middle to come and see our house. There's nothing here. Where is the luggage? Where could it be? What do you mean, where could it be? For details, please ask that person directly. After saying that, I could hear a voice of anger from the other end of the phone. Enough with the jokes. Ben let out a small scream. Hearing that voice and trying to suppress my laughter, Aaron appeared. Cindy, I'm sorry for the trouble my family has caused. Soon after, I heard my father-in-law's voice from the other end of the phone. They seemed to be on speaker, and I could faintly hear Ben and my mother-in-law's voices as well. It's okay. You supported me. What's that? Explain. I sent your luggage to another location. The day Ben left the house, it was my father-in-law who contacted me. He first apologized for not being able to stop the unilateral actions of Ben and my mother-in-law. Then he said he would handle them and decided to send their luggage to the specified address. Thanks to the movers arranged by my father-in-law, the luggage transfer went smoothly. So, what will happen to this house? After explaining everything, I heard Ben's voice of confusion. I sold that house. What? You sold it? Why would you do something like that on your own? That house was inherited by me. My sister didn't want it, so she agreed it was okay to sell, and I decided to sell it. What's the problem? The house was well located and had been beautifully renovated, so it quickly found a buyer. In fact, Aaron Sr. liked it and immediately offered to buy it. As a result, the house was already owned by its new owner. Isn't that a bit too selfish? Ben, which mouth of yours can say such things? It was you who decided everything without listening to Cindy's opinion. Now I will show you where you two will live. Wait a moment. What do you mean by you two? I've had enough of Diane. Hopefully, this way you'll understand. In the calm yet stern voice of my father-in-law, I could sense my mother-in-law's surprise. She was probably under my father-in-law's sharp gaze. Dad and Grandma, you're underestimating Mom too much. At that moment, Aaron, standing next to me, said as calmly as my father-in-law, I've heard everything from Mom. Why should my mom, who renovated the house after receiving it from Grandma and Auntie, have to give it to you guys? Dad, you must know how Grandma has been treating Mom. Despite that, why would you consider living together? Aaron, that's no way to speak to your father. Father? Just giving orders and expecting obedience. Is that what a father does? You ignored Mom's opinions, and sometimes mine too, didn't you? Honestly, I don't want to be a father like you, and I don't want my loved ones to meet people like Grandma. The direct words from Aaron, whom they had doted on, left them speechless. After that, I could hear my father-in-law sighing on the other end of the phone. I'm truly sorry, Cindy, he said, and then he ended the call. Just before the call ended, I heard surprised voices from Ben and my mother-in-law. With that, my father-in-law will probably handle those two. By the way, this high-rise condo is really wonderful, isn't it? Yes, I was hoping I could live here someday. The purchase of this high-rise condo was smoothly financed with the money from selling the house, my savings from when I was single, and the remaining inheritance. It looks like I will be able to live off the income from my work-at-home job. It seems like we'll have peaceful days ahead for a while. You know, I actually valued Mom over Dad because you taught me proper things, even though you were strict. According to Aaron, while Ben would buy him anything he wanted, he seldom provided strict guidance and rarely listened to him. Even when he talked about school, Ben would just say I see and not engage seriously, always suggesting, let's go shopping next holiday, only wanting to go where he wanted. More than Ben, it was important for me to listen carefully, sometimes scold him, and seriously consider his future. It's true that since Aaron got through his rebellious phase, he occasionally gave Ben cold looks. Also, I remember when Ben was criticizing me, Aaron would intervene as if to protect me, saying, "That can wait. We have something important to discuss now." Children are more sensitive to their parents' actions than we might think. Every time Dad said something to you, Mom, he would insult you for being unemployed. So, I decided to send money to help you. Huh? I hadn't heard about that. I heard it from Grandpa. Apparently, all the money I sent ended up going to Grandma. My father-in-law had long suspected my mother-in-law's extravagant lifestyle. Indeed, Ben was sending her travel vouchers and gourmet food, but that wasn't all. Aside from that, my mother-in-law was frequently enjoying luxury lunches and shopping. The gifts Ben sent every month couldn't possibly explain it all. Despite this, the shared savings remained untouched. Turns out that all the remittances from Aaron were being taken by Ben and passed directly to my mother-in-law. I can't believe it. Knowing that, I've decided I don't want anything more to do with Dad. Aaron's expression was stern, clearly indicating his resolve. He seemed to be at the peak of his anger. I no longer intend to support Dad, and Grandpa said he's going to divorce Grandma. That's right. As Aaron said, my father-in-law proceeded with the divorce from my mother-in-law afterward. My mother-in-law tried to cling to my father-in-law, but he was fed up with her and Ben's self-centered actions and coldly pushed them away. I'll split the assets, but don't expect any inheritance. My father-in-law stated decisively, deciding to spend all his available funds and move into a facility. Due to my mother-in-law's wastefulness, there wasn't much inheritance left in the first place. Afterward, my father-in-law moved into the facility, letting go of my mother-in-law and Ben. As I was finally enjoying some peaceful days, I got another call from Ben. "Hey, it's me, Ben. I know. What do you want?" It's really tough, really. Reluctantly listening to him, the wasteful spending by my mother-in-law continued as usual. Ben had used up all the money he earned, and now they were even dipping into their living expenses. Previously, I supported the household with the money I earned, and we had remittances from Aaron, but now that these were gone, they were in a difficult situation. "You're my wife, aren't you? Help me." "No, I'm not your wife anymore." What? The divorce papers I received that day were promptly filled out and submitted by me. That means our marital relationship had already ended long ago. Unbelievable. Why did you submit it that day? You were the one who wrote it and brought it to me, right? I just followed through and submitted it. There shouldn't be any problem. Ben was at a loss for words upon hearing my response. He probably didn't anticipate that his own actions would backfire on him. "So, can't we start over?" "What? No way. I've finally become free from you. There's no reason to go back." As I responded coldly, there was a noise on the other end of the phone. "It's me, Cindy." "What is it, Diane?" It seemed like my mother-in-law had picked up the phone. I felt a strong aversion inside me upon hearing her contrived, sweet voice. "I'm really sorry for being cold to you. So, do you remember how much I suffered? You tried to make me quit my job even before we were married, blamed me for not being able to have children, and tried to take Aaron away from me. If it weren't for my father-in-law helping, things would have been much worse. If you were in the same situation, do you think you could forgive me?" My mother-in-law kept silent after my question. I will never forget nor forgive the treatment I received from her. And I have no intention to forgive Ben either. While you two were happily traveling, I was being ignored, wasn't I? From now on, please enjoy your wonderful lives. Goodbye. After declaring that, I hung up the phone, blocked his number, and cut off all ties with Ben and his family. Afterward, I heard that Ben and my mother-in-law were reluctantly living in a cheap apartment provided by my father-in-law. Ben had spent so much on his mother that there was hardly any savings left. He had a decent income, so he initially planned to save a bit before moving out. My mother-in-law tried to start housekeeping but was unable to curb her spending habits and do housekeeping, since she had been away from domestic chores for years, thanks to my father-in-law who had retired and taken over the household duties. While she was unaccustomed to housework, she fell and broke her leg, necessitating care. Overwhelmed with caregiving and housework, Ben accumulated fatigue, which led to mistakes at work, resulting in an irrevocable error that eventually forced him to resign. That's why he contacted me for help. Aaron visited and reported on Ben's plight, but he declined to help him. He should have at least saved the money I sent. Indeed, but regretting it now won't help. Meanwhile, my life was progressing smoothly. Thanks to Aaron and his friends recommending me, my client base for home-based work has increased, significantly improving my income. Aaron, who used to barely visit when Ben was around, now comes by frequently, and although he offers to send money, I decline as I'm not struggling financially due to my earnings. Thanks to that, Aaron has been able to save money and has moved into the same high-rise condo. Whenever I bring over some side dishes, he is always delighted and grateful. I'm truly happy. Being able to work at my own pace and having my beloved Aaron nearby makes every day immensely joyful for me. Years have passed. Today is a special day. Mom, I want to introduce someone to you. It's the day Aaron is bringing his fiancée. She is someone I've known well for a long time since she has been dating Aaron since high school. Ben doesn't know about this because it would cause trouble if he found out. Well, I doubt he would be interested anyway. Aaron is a bit too kind, so I feel reassured to entrust him to his capable fiancé. Just this time there is a formal greeting as fiancé and mother, so both of us are somewhat nervous. We know each other, so relax. By the way, there's something important I need to tell you. To my surprise, she was already pregnant with Aaron's child. That's what led to a prompt marriage. But seeing them so happy, I sent my heartfelt blessings. Determined not to become like my mother-in-law, I decided to support them while maintaining a healthy distance. Thanks to such measures, I feel that the relationship with my daughter-in-law is being well maintained. Occasionally, they come to show me their child's face, and we have been going out more frequently without burdening each other. Contrarily, I am unaware of the current situation of Ben and my mother-in-law as they have been abandoned by others. One's actions ultimately return to oneself. I must act carefully. With this awareness, I continue to work and handle household chores within my limits, enjoying a peaceful daily life. My husband and mother-in-law chuckled and pulled out a piece of paper. It contained absurd terms like entrusting the house to my husband and not complaining, and even had my mother's signature on it. I could only think someone scammed and forced her to sign. This is completely invalid. This is clearly a scam. Yes, this is my handwriting, my mother calmly admitted. Without understanding, we were kicked out of the house, handed a filled-out divorce form. My husband looked at me with hopeful eyes. Did he think I would cling to him? I will never look back. He will understand eventually. As I clenched my teeth, my mother muttered beside me, "This is happiness." My name is Jessica. I am a 53-year-old housewife who works part-time. Lately, my main issue has been severe hand eczema. My husband is a businessman. We live at my parents' place together with them. We have no children. However, a bigger issue troubles me more than my eczema. It's the possibility that my mother might be developing dementia. I say possibility because she hasn't been officially diagnosed yet, but her memory and judgment are noticeably declining. She often forgets things and sometimes can't even recall what she has forgotten. Sometimes she completely changes personality and behaves unpredictably. There are days when such things happen repeatedly, and there are also perfectly calm days with nothing unusual. She used to be hardworking and attentive. Ever since she injured her knee, she has mostly stayed indoors, and her condition seems to have worsened gradually. Her knee pain has healed, but for safety, I don't want her to go out alone. My father and I continue to live our daily lives while taking care of her. While I'm at my part-time job, my father watches over her at home so he can respond immediately if anything happens. I'm worried about her symptoms worsening and feeling anxious about my uncooperative husband. We need to come up with a plan for the future. One day, my father became seriously ill and needed long-term hospitalization, making it impossible to leave my mother alone. It wasn't like I could afford to take time off from work. When I talked to my husband about it, he reacted as if it was someone else's problem, saying, "You worry too much. Fires can start from unattended flames, and she could get lost. You worry too much. What if something happens? If you start worrying about that, there's no end to it. My husband clearly seemed annoyed. He's lived with my mother for a long time, but this attitude was too much. After all, the reason we were living together was because of my husband's insufficient income and we were staying as dependents. Even a crane would feel the urge to repay a favor. Doesn't he have that kind of consideration at all? Then, why don't you quit your job and take care of her? It's not that simple. Even though it was just a part-time job, I had no intention of quitting my long-term position. The income was decent, and it made me want to ask him if he would support me. I think we can live as we have up till now, if we use care services and with your cooperation. Why me? Just occasionally would be enough. But it's your mother, right? That's true, but still. It has nothing to do with me. Handle it yourself. That way of speaking is, first of all, is her condition bad enough to need care services? That's for the hospital too. You've been complaining about your hand eczema and the pain from standing at your part-time job at the beauty salon for a long time. Just quit already. My husband smacked his lips in annoyance and left immediately. How terrible. I do have hand eczema, but I never said I wanted to quit. It angered me to have my beloved job belittled. I knew this time would come someday. You say it has nothing to do with you, but that can't be true. We're family. I even thought about doing the same if his mother were in the same situation. It was infuriating, but there was nothing I could do. I was able to be flexible because I worked part-time. It's still a long way from now, but when my mother will be in need of help with changing clothes or bathing, she will likely resist. If I quit being a hairstylist at this age, returning to the field will be difficult. Trends and chemicals constantly change, making it hard to keep up. I even have clients who specifically request me. But there are many other hairstylists, yet only I can take care of my mother. Feeling down won't change the situation. I must stay positive and keep moving. Once my father is discharged from the hospital, we should be able to return to our previous life. And to do so, I will have my mother thoroughly examined at the hospital, have a serious talk with my husband, apply for caregiving services, and plan for the future. I really don't want to quit my job. I plan to ask for some time off for a while. A few days after making that decision, my father, who had been hospitalized, suddenly passed away. I couldn't believe it. When a relative dies, there's no time, not even for mourning. Preparations for the funeral and numerous procedures are needed one after another. My mother was devastated, sometimes looking dazed like a child and occasionally bursting into tears, unable to control her emotions. Dressed in mourning clothes, my mother seemed transformed, fulfilling her role as the chief mourner with dignity. I also did my best to support her, staying by her side throughout. It was quick, but we got to send off my father. For the first time, we truly felt the loneliness of his absence, both emotionally and physically exhausted. He wasn't talkative, but I remember my kind-hearted father. I understand that he is gone, but his chair, teacup, reading glasses, and the novel he was halfway through reading were still as they were left. Neither my mother nor I were ready to put these things away yet. It was at this time that my husband brought his parents over. Indeed, he had said this morning that he would bring them to help clean up the house. While I appreciated the thought, I was not ready yet, so I decided to decline their help and just serve them tea before asking them to leave. My mother seemed quite tired and soon began dozing off. I wanted to leave her undisturbed. I led my in-laws to the dining room and prepared tea. My husband demanded, not tea, make coffee and bring out something sweet. I momentarily thought, these are your parents. Why don't you handle it? But harboring resentment for long is pointless. I've decided to live positively. Let's call a service to dispose of the large items quickly. Let's do that, said my mother-in-law and husband. I wish they wouldn't decide everything on their own. I'm sorry, but I'm not ready to clean up yet. What? My mother-in-law was surprised. Let's postpone it for a little while longer. What? My mother and I are emotionally not ready yet. When I explained this, my mother-in-law looked doubtful and argued, that's troublesome. We can't do that. I couldn't understand why it would be troublesome for her. I looked at my husband for his reaction, but he avoided my gaze. The house has already been passed on to the eldest son and his wife. The renovations are about to start soon. And what about where we will go? I'm sorry, I don't quite understand what you mean. Suddenly, my husband declared, from now on, I'll live here with my parents. What are you talking about? Everything has already been decided. What? But this is my home. I was bewildered, and my husband wouldn't look me in the eyes. Jessica, didn't you know? My mother-in-law joined as if it were obvious. I did tell you. You probably forgot because you were busy with the funeral, my husband stated calmly. There's no way I would miss hearing such an important information, no matter how busy I was. I have no idea what you are talking about, and you can't do this without my consent. Your consent isn't needed anymore. It's already resolved. What do you mean? I've already settled it with your mother. I felt as if cold water had been splashed on me. When did such a discussion even happen? Could it be that they decided this while my mother was out of her senses? This can't be allowed. I stood there, stunned. My mother-in-law addressed my husband. You know, someone who has quit their job and does nothing, and an old person who needs lots of care can be a handful, right? My husband nodded in agreement. That's right. That's why you two need to leave this house, and preferably soon. I was too shocked by her words to even respond. Someone who does nothing and an old person who needs lots of care? Is she referring to my mother and me? Why do we have to leave? This is my parents' house. Please take that back. Oh, Jessica, don't make such a scary face. I am still working, and I'm not being dependent. My mother does not have dementia. That's completely false. I cannot tell lies, haha. How can she laugh and say that? My head was spinning. While smiling, my husband and my mother-in-law pulled out a document. There's no taking it back. We've already got the signatures on paper. The document contained absurd terms like entrusting the house to my husband and not complaining, and even had my mother's signature on it. Indeed, it was my mother's signature. I could only think it was a scam that forced her to sign. This is completely invalid. This is clearly a scam. Huh? Did you make her sign this while she was not in her right mind? That's invalid. What are you talking about? You just said that she doesn't have dementia. He retorted. At that moment, my mother, who should have been sleeping until just before, appeared. Hello everyone, what brings you here today? My mother greeted everyone cheerfully, without any prior indication. This signature is your handwriting, isn't it? You did sign here, right? My husband suddenly pressed my mother. Yes, this is my handwriting. My mother smoothly acknowledged. This is a despicable tactic. Now that you understand, pack your things quickly and leave the house. Impossible. If you continue to stay here, I'll call the police for trespassing. I was threatened. This situation was too unreasonable. Without getting to the bottom of it, we were driven out of the house, while holding a completed divorce form. My husband looked at me with a smirk, as if expecting something. It was as if he thought I would cling to him. I tried hard not to meet his eyes, holding back my anger. When leaving the house, I wanted to take at least one of my father's belongings, and what I managed to get was a pair of leather shoes that were at hand. I remember how lovingly my father had cared for them. Though men's shoes may be of no use, it was better than leaving with nothing. My mother and I got into the car and just kept driving aimlessly. Anger towards my husband and his parents, sadness over what I had lost, and a vague sense of anxiety mixed together. Carrying an immense sense of despair, I wondered how my mother and I would go on from here. It seemed impossible to have hope anymore. I couldn't stop my tears. Then, my mother, who had been quiet all along, murmured softly, "This is happiness." Even after my father's sudden death and being driven out of the house, my mother expressed emotions opposite to mine. Could she be confused? Complex emotions different from anger welled up in me, and I found no words to reply. But my mother continued, "It feels refreshing. Unnecessary things naturally drift away, and you don't hold any regrets, do you? But I do have attachments to my childhood home." When I responded bluntly, my mother laughed and said, "That old, big house is falling apart. Why do they even like it? It's hard to maintain and dispose of, but it's lucky that they're taking it off our hands." Her optimistic attitude was surprising. I wanted Dad to live longer. What are you talking about? It was better this way. I didn't want to make your father sad. What about the furniture and appliances that you liked and chose? Aren't you sad to let those go? We can just buy new ones. That's the fun part. Aren't you upset being called a senile old person? That's a path everyone will follow. What the? Even though I felt like we had lost everything, my mother was remarkably calm. Annoyed, I thought that she would probably forget what was said today very soon. "I'm truly happy when you're by my side," my mother said. "If you weren't here, maybe I would have followed your father." She added, "Mom, don't worry, it's okay," she said, and then she started dozing off again. She was childlike in her innocence. Yes, it's enough that I remember the things my mother forgets. Although I'm not fully recovered yet, being with my mother makes me feel like I can manage somehow. Right after that, I received a message from my husband. "If you beg me, I might forgive you. It shouldn't be a problem to put your mother in a facility," he said. Huh? He might forgive me? Did I do something wrong? It was clear they intended to treat me as a maid. Not wanting to talk anymore, I answered, "That's fine," and ended the call. After that, my mind cleared up. Actually, I no longer needed my husband. I explained the situation to my part-time job and decided to become an independent hairstylist. Using my savings, I acquired a used single-family home in the town next door. That house had previously been used as both a residence and a hair salon. The owner of my part-time job helped arrange the purchase, and I got it for an unbelievably low price. The place allowed me to work while taking care of my mother at home. The owner also greatly supported me when I needed equipment and renovations for the shop, saying, "Jessica has supported us for a long time." That kindness deeply touched my weary heart. I used up all my savings for the opening, but I had no regrets. I had given up on owning my salon because my husband was against it, but it was my long-held dream. Whether I'll succeed is unknown. The anger towards my husband and his parents hadn't completely disappeared. However, the business helped distract me from those feelings, and the excitement of new challenges outweighed them. I won't look back. I have finally opened my own hair salon, a dream I've held for many years. My mother helped with cleaning and laundry at the salon. She enjoyed gardening in her free time. Talking with neighbors became part of our daily routine. It really helped that they promoted the shop. The time I spent daydreaming also decreased. Just as my new life rhythm with my mother calmed down, I received a message from my husband. "Why aren't you contacting me?" "What? I said I would forgive you, didn't I? Come back home immediately." "What are you talking about? Don't be stubborn when you're struggling." My husband scoffed as he spoke. I tilted my head. "Am I really struggling? Me? Where did you hear such a rumor? I heard you opened your own salon. It's impossible for an older hairstylist to manage alone, especially with a mother with dementia. That must be tough." I've worked as a hairstylist for a long time and had many regular customers. My salon was located in the center of a residential area, so it was not uncommon for passersby to stop. I wish he would stop with the baseless speculations. In fact, I was making much more now than when I was working part-time. If there's nothing more to discuss, I'm hanging up. Wait for me. "What? I want to return your father's belongings, so could you come to the house?" "What?" "The belongings of my father that I could hardly take with me." My mother had said, memories are enough, so I had given up, but if there was still something left, I indeed wanted to keep it. I left my mother with a neighbor and headed to my childhood home for the first time in a while. At that moment, I had forgotten how terrible my husband had been and was even feeling thankful for some reason. The scene at the entrance of my childhood home was bizarre, with unnecessary cardboard boxes piled up and mud and dead leaves left as they were. I was surprised to see the house so dirty, and my ex-husband came out from inside. "Hey, long time no see. I'm short on time. Please hand over the belongings quickly. Come in and take them." It had been a long time since I returned to my childhood home, and it was so dirty that I hesitated to even take off my shoes. It's troublesome with things scattered around. Mom can't clean it up. In the previous residence, the wife of the eldest son was in charge of cleaning. While he complained, I wondered why he wouldn't clean up himself. He was still a person lacking compassion. But that was irrelevant to me now. I no longer had any attachment to a residence ravaged by others. What used to be the living room had now become my husband's sleeping area. It was quite messy, with remnants of snacks and drinks scattered about, and an unpleasant smell lingered. It made me not even want to breathe. "This is filthy." I said it without thinking, and my husband responded, "Right? That's why you should come and clean." Suddenly he said something absurd. "Really? If you had apologized earlier, it wouldn't have gotten this bad." "What? For $15 per hour, you could clean up. It's a good deal, you'd make some money too." The smiling face of my ex-husband was right in front of me. Yes, he thought I was struggling with money. It didn't seem worth arguing, and I wanted to get away quickly. "I refuse. Please hand over my father's belongings now." That. It seems my mother accidentally threw them away. So that's what was going on. I wasn't exactly suspecting a lie, but it was a gamble. And indeed, it was disappointing. Disappointing. But this made my decision clear. I had nothing more to expect from this residence or my husband. As I was about to leave, my husband blocked the way. How annoying. "Please move." "Wait, don't be mad. It's okay for you to come back, just you." "What? Really? You're such a bother. You should have just complied. Listen, this is your last chance." "I don't understand. What are you dissatisfied with? If you need a maid, you should hire someone else." "Hey, don't get ahead of yourself. What can a part-time worker do?" I felt insulted. It was ridiculous. Had he forgotten? I worked part-time because he disliked it. He didn't like it when my income increased. I supported him so he could focus on his career, but now I was fed up with being looked down upon as just a part-time worker. You're in the way. What? I said you're in the way. You can't do anything with your meager salary. What? Ask your beloved mother to clean. Stunned, my husband watched as I left the house. I feel lighter. Seeing my drastically changed home, I no longer felt any attachment. Although I was disappointed that nothing was left of my father's belongings. It was better than being held captive by it. The look of surprise on my husband's face was something to see. Now, let's go home quickly. My mother is waiting. Later, I received a job offer from the owner of the beauty salon where I used to work. It was for a mobile beautician role, providing home visit services for clients who need care and can't make it to the salon. I registered with the local government and visited homes upon requests from community residents. Sometimes, work was also required at care facilities. There are hairstylists who specialize in this service. Since I also had repeat customers at my own salon, taking on this job once a week would be manageable. However, I had a mother who I couldn't leave alone. Lately, she's been well, but she didn't like going out often. Why not? I'll come with you and help out, my mother suggested when I was pondering. I usually thought of an assistant as an apprentice hairstylist, but this was an eye-opening idea. That's right. We could go out together. The doctor said the same thing. Actively interacting with society and living an active life is optimal for preventing dementia. It's important not to just worry, but to try things out. So, I decided to take on this job a few times a week, while at clients' homes. My mother helped with tidying up and served as a conversation partner for the clients, greatly aiding as an assistant. She was active and attentive, just like she used to be. No more absent-mindedness. Then, one day, my husband showed up at the salon. What did you come for? While it was inevitable that the location of my shop got known, would he intentionally come to show malice? When will he stop being a nuisance? As if to protect my mother, I hid her behind me and held my phone ready to dial 911 to call the police. Could you give me a shampoo and cut? Don't fool around. What do you want? You see, I received an eviction notice from the real estate agent. What? You sold that land and house, didn't you? I can't think of any such thing. What do you mean? They thought it was an abandoned house and sent a cleaning crew. This is no joke. So that was it. It was my mother's doing. My mother had let go of the family home. Or had the change of ownership she mentioned before been completed? Wait a minute. The only thing my mother signed was that suspicious contract. Did you think that homemade documents settled everything? I thought you were incompetent, but not to this extent. I'm at a loss for words. Give it back. That's my house. And it seems the demolition has already started. I don't know anything about that. Are you going to kick my elderly parents out of their home? You dare say that after you took my mother's house. I don't care. Then I'll make this house my own. Owning a salon and having a maid, isn't that perfect? My husband opened the door to the house attached to the shop. Don't enter without permission. Just as I was about to call the police. What? My husband suddenly calmed down. What's this? Pointing to the leather shoes of my father left in the entrance, he asked with a trembling voice. Is there someone new already? This morning, I had taken them out of the box on a whim and felt like polishing them. He probably didn't realize they belonged to my father. Well, that would be expected. The husband who didn't notice when I cut my hair by 8 inches wouldn't remember whose shoes those are. Are you cheating on me? Even though I'm still here. Huh? We've been separated for a while. Who is it? I can't forgive this. My husband turned red with anger. Can't forgive? What does he mean by that? What is he thinking? I smirked inwardly. Perhaps it wouldn't be so bad to scare someone who behaves so selfishly. Are you ready? Are you prepared to face what's coming? You should know from those expensive shoes. Half-heartedness will lead to painful consequences. I stared intently at my husband's face. He was sweating, his eyes darting around, unable to hide his agitation. I can't believe that my cowardly yet prideful husband was really prepared for this. You're awfully quiet. What's wrong? Should I call him now? What? Call? What? Is someone there? Hey darling, can you come here, please? Goodbye. My husband ran off like a whirlwind. My mother covered her face with her hands, trying to suppress her laughter. Ahaha, look, how fast he can run away. I felt a sense of relief, my tension going away. My mother kept laughing. Ahahaha, I wonder who did you call? Your acting was marvelous. Hearing this, I also started giggling. I doubt my husband will come here again. Thank you, Dad, for your help. It was, of course, my mother's doing that our former house was sold. You wouldn't really go through with changing the ownership, would you? Did you know everything? Of course. Signing that document couldn't possibly have any effect. That was the plan from the start. I just thought it might be difficult to proceed if they knew about the dementia, so I was just watching how things would go. My mother said this without any doubt in her eyes. I was surprised she was aware she had cognitive impairment, but then she added, "Lately, my mind has become clearer, as if the fog had lifted. I think I'm getting better. I still forget things, but I've always been like that. But to easily give up our home. Oh, it was your father's idea to sell that house. The plan was to sell it after you both moved out and then move to a convenient apartment near the station. Really, life doesn't always go as planned, does it? That's true." Reflecting back, the signs of dementia began to appear when my mother started to become housebound. Being naturally energetic, she seemed suited to interacting with people and staying active both mentally and physically. I hope she continues to stay healthy. "I have to earn my own pocket money as an assistant," she said, "so it seems I don't need to worry for a while." As for my ex-husband and his parents, they tried to return to their previous home but were not welcomed by the eldest son and his wife. Given the difficult personality of my mother-in-law who disliked cleaning, and my self-centered and unhygienic ex-husband, it's no wonder they were refused. The house was already in the name of the eldest son, and they couldn't touch it. The relationship between my ex-husband and his parents seems to have deteriorated, with both sides placing blame on the other. My ex-husband was blamed for losing their place to live. "You need to take responsibility." Out of necessity, he bought a used house with an unreasonable mortgage, but knowing his savings and income, it seemed reckless to me. He will have to live frugally to pay off the debt. The new home already looked like a trash house, and they had just moved in. They also got scolded by the strict neighborhood association president for stacking garbage bags in front of the house, and were disliked by the neighbors. They really needed to clean up. Honestly, it's none of my business, and I don't care much, but I hope they don't bother others. And you know what? His parents are still healthy. They should work to support their low-income son. If they don't want to be scolded, they will at least have to clean up by themselves. It should also have good effects for preventing dementia.